Sunday night with SRT. I want to start by thanking all of you for your support through your attendance at our events and hopefully making a small donation to help us defray our costs. I want to start by also reminding you that Helen has asked me if you haven't already done so, if you wouldn't mind putting your cell phones on silent. I didn't mind before I left the house. Tonight we bring you another of our Get to Know Your Neighbor interviews, and Helen Ford's SRT's answer to Leslie Stahl. I told her I was going to say that, and she said, "Oh." And I said, "Well, you're better than she is." It's as close as I can come. Yep. She will interview a very energetic and active Soleil couple, Bev and Craig Stichtenoth. If you, like me, were not aware that they pronounced her name Stichtenoth, well, then we've already learned one thing we can. Well, Bev and Craig have lived in Soleil since 2013, but for the rest of the story, SRT presents the interview by Helen Ford with Bev and Craig Stichtenoth.
Thank you, Ed, and a warm welcome to each of you. First, we will learn about the Stichtenoth's early years growing up, one in the Midwest and one on the East Coast. So we'll begin with Craig. You were born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and grew up there. What was your life like there?
When I think about it, it was growing up, my brother was 5 years younger than I. It was growing up in Midwestern suburbia. It was a Delhi township, so it wasn't Cincinnati proper, it wasn't the city, but it was called Cincinnati, the post office, And Delhi township was a mixture of subdivisions and shopping centers and greenhouses and a few farms. So it was kind of that transition. And it was a good place to grow up. Cincinnati was a sports town to young boys like me and my brother. Of course, we had the Reds. They actually won the World Series back when I was really young. And then when I was in college and my brother was in high school, it was the Big Red Machine. The Bengals came along in 1970. And it was even for NBA fans with a history, there was the Cincinnati Royals. So it was a sports town, and we were involved with that, and as young boys would be. It was also a river town. Cincinnati was a river town, built in the river. And because of my dad's involvement with a certain business on the river, we got to get up close and personal with that experience of being on the wharf and actually being on the river. The other thing I remember about my youth was the Delhi Swim Club. It was a private swim club that my father and a few other fellows kind of started. It's where I learned how to swim. It's where I learned how to be a competitive swimmer. And it's later where I became a lifeguard and a teacher. So I had to teach young kids how to swim. So that was a big part of my upbringing as well.
Well, what activities did you participate in during high school?
So in high school, I was on the swim team, as you know, the continuation of what I started.
Can't see him.
I'll see you at the outdoor pool tomorrow. I peaked at the age of 9, so I wasn't like a champion swimmer, but I was enough of an ability to contribute to the team. And the cool thing was, our coach was a gentleman named Yoshi Oyakawa, and he was the 52 Helsinki gold medalist in the backstroke for America. And so it's always cool when you get coached by an Olympian. And he's still with us. He's still he's in his 80s and still out there swimming probably, like today. I also was involved with band. I learned how to play the trumpet as a junior high. I didn't have the right mouthpiece for a trumpet. And so between our sophomore and junior year, the band director was looking for tuba players. And he said, Craig, I need you to switch to tuba. Well, that was the year I had a lot of scout activities going on for the summer. I said, I don't need time to learn it. He said, that's okay. When you come back in the fall, just carry it around till you learn how to play it. Now, it wasn't a bad move. I had a better mouth for that than the mouthpiece on the tuba. I played junior and senior year, and I marched for 4 years in college with a tuba. I never would have been a trumpet player in college, so it worked out well. I guess I was involved in church choirs and so forth, so that's why I started singing a little bit, was at that time in my high school life as well.
Okay. What influence did your mom have on you, and did she work outside the home?
So mom got her degree at my university. So the most important thing I think is it kind of influenced me to think about Miami as a place to go to college. She was big with her sorority. We used to go back for a one-night weekend and homecoming and that kind of thing. So Miami was a big part of it. She worked right out of college, but she didn't work after she started having kids. So she was with Procter & Gamble for a while. But by the time that I was growing up and my brother was growing up, she was doing teaching, but not working full-time outside the home. It was also a big support for my dad and his art career, which we'll talk about.
Okay. So we know your father was an artist, but what made his particularly unique creative effort such a success?
So my dad went to college at University of Cincinnati on the GI Bill after World War II. First generation of his side of the family to go to college, and he got a degree in art, and he kind of created this dual career concept where he was a commercial artist, first of all, did marketing and advertising for clients. He was also a fine artist, doing paintings and drawings, portraits, lots of different kind of things. And he had a unique way of combining the two, where he could make fine art become a marketing tool for a particular client. An example of that would be in the early 60s, he was working for a client called Mainline Steamers. They were the owners of the Delta Queen, the riverboat that used to do overnight trips on the river. And he threw out the idea of them doing an art show that would then travel the river to the river towns and talk about what it was like to take a cruise on the river through the eyes of an artist. So we got to ride down the river on vacation, and he took pictures and did drawings, and that art show had 40-some pieces that went to Paducah, and Louisville, and Evansville, and river towns, and promoted cruising on the river with a fine art show. He did other things of that nature as well, and that was an interesting creation that he did. One other thing I'll mention is that we talked about sports and the Royals. Oscar Robertson was a very famous basketball player that played at University of Cincinnati, and then went to the NBA with the Royals. In the early 60s, my dad had a full-life action painting of Oscar Robertson. Literally, it was full size. He had to keep repainting it from the UC uniform to a Royals uniform, and it's now in the collection of UC.
So did your father being an artist influence you in any way to take up art or photography?
Art was, I would say art, yes. I was, interested in art in high school. Did a little art in college. Did one of my paintings from 1973 from the back of the room. I thought that I'd do art when I got here, it's late, but it hasn't happened yet. I didn't have the talent my dad had, for sure. But the art concepts that I think I learned from him certainly play now in my photography experiences. I didn't think of photography then as being something to do. And I also think that it had an impact on my early career as a geologist. I won't talk more about that. But in the days when I became a geologist, there were no computers. So you literally had to draw with colored pencils your illustrations to explain your concept to the manager you're trying to sell a prospect or an idea to. So being someone who had that art ability a little bit helped me, I think, make some good drawings and sell some ideas to people.
Good, good. Well, let's retirement from Craig?
Well, my parents moved out to the suburbs from Brooklyn with my two older sisters in the early 50s to a house that my dad largely built by himself. I came along a few years later. My dad continued to commute to New York. He was an accountant for Joseph E. Seagram's and Sons. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she remained that way until we were all in school. So in the early 60s, my grandmother came and lived with us. She moved out from Brooklyn and lived with us. And my mother became her church secretary. The town of Glen Rock had about 13,000 residents. There were 4 elementary schools that fed into a junior high school. The junior high and high school were all in one building. It was kind of a small town USA. We had a great 4th of July, very American 4th of July parade, a fair, and it was just, a great place to grow up. We go back for high school reunions, and everybody says, we can't believe what a great town we grew up in.
Well, what did you participate in high school?
Well, I was a good student, so in high school, I was a member of the National Honor Society. I had taken 4 years of Spanish, and one of my good friends was president of the Spanish Club, so I was involved in the Spanish Club. Also the Booster Club, had to root on the Glen Rock Panthers. And I ran for senior class secretary, and I was elected as senior class secretary. Outside of high school, I had taken 8 years of piano lessons. When I got to be a freshman, sophomore year, I realized that I was too busy to keep that up. So, and then I also wanted to earn some money, so I worked as a bakery clerk on the weekends. And then I became a hostess in a Chinese restaurant. So I was the takeout girl.
Whoa!
He called me and I got your order placed.
Well, did you have many opportunities to go into New York?
Being so close to New York, yeah, our field trips were often into the city, museums, plays, family, we went to Radio City Music Hall into plays, lots of museums. After high school, I had a summer job at Joseph E. Seagram's, and I was in the accounts payable department. And my main job was to take over for the cashier or the assistant cashier when they went on vacation in the petty cash office. That was way back when. I don't think they have petty cash anymore. And two very interesting things happened when I was in there for the summer. One time it was when Edgar Bronfman's son, Edgar Bronfman Jr., was kidnapped. And we used to have to go across the street to replenish our petty cash. Well, I was used to making that journey, so I went across the street and got some money for the ransom. Another time we came in and the head cashier had just left on vacation and the place had been robbed. So the FBI was called in, so I've been fingerprinted and questioned by the FBI.
Well, when you were just a teenager, you began to have dreams that actually foretold future events that came true. Can you tell us about that gift?
I was a girl of 14 and 15 and my older sisters were getting married, and it was like any girl, you're like, I wonder who I'm going to marry. And I had a dream that I married a Craig. But I thought it was a nightmare because the only Craig I knew was a guy who wasn't very smart, and he was a little bit overweight, and I just thought, oh, there's no way that's ever going to happen. Let's just forget about that. I also had a dream one time that my mother had a baby, and my sisters and I were all around her, and we found out a couple hours later more recently, well, not recently, it was probably 30 years ago. I haven't had anything recently. About 30 years ago, the last time I saw my dad, all of a sudden he turned real yellow. And it just in my eyes, you know. And 3 months later, he was dead from liver cancer. So, yeah, as I said, I haven't had any dreams lately, and I won't tell you if I ever do.
Well, let's move along to your college years and the ultimate marriage. So, Bev, you both ended up at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. We know Craig is from Ohio, but why did you choose this faraway college?
Well, when you live in New Jersey, you either go to a commuter school or you go to Rutgers or Princeton. My sisters, at being older, they left and went to college outside of New Jersey. So it was kind of, they weren't even paved the way for me. I'd always been intrigued by the name Miami of Ohio. And doing research for where I wanted to go to school, it was very good in business and it was very good in education. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to major in elementary education or go into something like accounting, which is my dad's field. So I applied to Miami and got in. And it's known as the Harvard of the Midwest at the time. So it was a very good school. And now, I don't think I can get in there now.
Well, how did you and Craig meet?
Well, at freshman orientation, I was encouraged to take a geography class that would fulfill one of my requirements. And it had a lab section. And I said, oh, that's okay. I can handle a lecture class and a lab class, no problem. So the first time the lab section met, the teaching assistant, by literally drawing names out of a hat, put Craig and I in the same group. And our assignment was to compare Canada and Morocco. So then the next time we had a big lecture class, Craig sat next to me. And the professor then said, okay, where you're sitting today, you're going to sit the rest of the quarter, passing around the seating chart, and you just put your name where you're sitting now. So he got stuck sitting next to me for the rest of the quarter. So my roommate was like, oh, he's going to ask me out. And I said, oh, I don't think so. And she said, oh, no, he's going to ask me out. Well, he did. He asked me out, and our first date was October 12, 1973. We went to a Kappa Sigma fraternity party.
Oh, that's a good memory.
Wow, it was a good party.
Craig, you were 2 years ahead of Beth and a lofty junior when she was just a freshman. So what appealed to you about her?
Well, a lot of people in college, they meet at bars, they meet at parties, they meet in the dining hall, but we met in class. So my first impression of her was that I was a student, and I could see all very quickly that she was a pretty serious student, a very capable student, but at the same time, when you know, she's fun, she's refreshing, so it was a good combination. But I think back at it, I think the fact that I met her as a student first, and the idea of taking her out for a date didn't happen for a couple weeks later.
It wasn't that you were slow. Well, Craig, I know that you graduated from Miami U with a degree in geology about 2 years before Beth finished. So what did you do then?
Well, most geology students, or many geology students, went on to go. I-75. So for the next couple of years, we were kind of long distance. We saw each other once a month, maybe, either back in Miami or Bowling Green or whatever else. We didn't see each other in the summer at all. So, I was working on a master's degree, and that worked out good.
So good. So bad. How many years was it before you married? Did he stay slow forever?
Yes, he did stay slow for my dad, well, my parents had stipulated that if I got married before I finished college, my husband was supposed to finish paying for my degree. So they kind of kept us from not getting married, you see. And they were very insistent that I have a career to fall back on, just in case he didn't fall. So for the last 2 years, we did have a long-term relationship, a long-distance relationship. I mean, we never spent the summer together. Our Christmas or holiday breaks, we were never together. So it was, once or twice a month, that was it. We got engaged in December of 1976. I got my BS degree in education from Miami University in May. And then 6 weeks later, we got married on June 25th, 1977. So it's been 45 years.
Well, Rick, since you finally moved, tell us about the company that hired you, and in what way did you think it was serendipity?
So, Bowling Green had a geology program and also a geophysics program, which was not a common degree to earn. While I wasn't even in geophysics, the fact that there was a geophysics program at Bowling Green was a reason why oil and gas companies wanted to come interview there, because geophysics was a valuable skill set to have in the industry. And so in the fall of '76, there were several companies that came to Bowling Green to interview, and one of them was Texaco. And the interviewer was from an office in Midland, Texas. And in January of that year, or the next year, 2077, I got an invitation to come and visit the Midland office, site visit. And I went down there, and I didn't know where Midland was. I'd never heard of Texas International Airlines.
Me either.
But I went down there and had a good interview, and they made me an offer to come work there. And I accepted that offer. I think the serendipity part of it, as I like to believe it, is that the division geologist was the gentleman making the offer after the interview and visit around the office. The two assistant division geologists in Midland at that time both had degrees from my university in Oxford, Ohio. And I'd like to think that maybe they looked kindly on poor Sam Bowling Green, who also had a degree from Miami, Ohio.
Well, how many years did you work for Texaco?
Well, Texaco merged with Chevron. We'll talk more about that as we get into some other parts of our story. But it's really one company, 35.5 years.
Okay, that's a long time.
You have to reinvent yourself along the way to last in the company for 35.5 years.
I'm leaving. I never made it that long. Well, Greg, since I believe that many in our audience are just as ignorant as I am, would you please explain in detail what an exploratory geologist does?
Well, most people understand what an explorer is. It's somebody like Christopher Columbus, Lewis and Clark, Magellan. They're seeking new places, seeking new things. And an exploration geologist is much the same way. We're looking for new places to acquire leases, new places to acquire data, new places to drill wells, and hopefully find new oil and gas fields. So you're looking away from where existing production already exists. And so exploration required conceptual thinking, building story what's going on in the subsurface with not often a lot of data. But it was an exciting, I think, a way to approach the science. There were clearly people who were more comfortable working in development, where there was more engineering and more data. Then people who were more excited, who were more interested in being part of an exploratory team. And I found myself in that latter category.
Okay. Well, now we're going to switch gears and find out about all the places they lived before coming to Soleil. I think Texaco is very much like IBM. I've been moved. So, first move was to this Midland, Texas, where they lived for 6.5 years. Craig, tell us about that.
So Midland, Texas is in West Texas. It was originally called Midway Station. It was the railroad station halfway between Fort Worth and El Paso. That's a pretty large distance. And we went to Midland in the fall of 1977 in a Pinto station wagon with not much that we could say we owned and about a 13 or 14-year-old cat.
Boring the West. And we just come back from Yellowstone and the Black Hills. Craig goes to work, comes home a couple hours later, what are you doing here? Well, we're transferred to New Orleans. Okay. So his parents came and stayed with the kids, and one of the results when we were out house hunting was Grandpa drew our sons, and those pictures are back there. So it was kind of a surprise when we came back.
It was a kind of surprise.
There was a surprise. We moved to Slidell, Louisiana, which is on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain. It's where the better schools were. I eventually volunteered in the schools, and primarily I was in the library of this one elementary school. There was several. I mean, they do things weird down here. I mean, the first elementary school was kindergarten through second grade. The next one was 3 through 5, and they would have like 10 classes of each one, each grade level. So when both kids were finally in elementary school, the second year we were there, I volunteered in the library of the older child's school. And next year, the volunteers were all depleted, and they said, well, Bev, you're the only one here, so you need to be in charge of volunteers, and you need to build up all the volunteers, because we need to have volunteers every day. So we eventually got about 20 ladies, and we covered the library Monday through Friday, morning and afternoon. I was the only one that knew the computer system, so when the librarian, and she had a husband with health issues and a daughter with health issues, I would have to be in there when there was a substitute. She finally said, well, you have a degree in education, go ahead and get on the sub list, and you can make $50 a day. So I got on the sub list, and everybody knew me. I was Shirley Sub. And from there, other teachers would ask me, and I would get to know the teachers coming into the library, so I would know which ones I wanted to sub for. And I did some long-term subbing, so that would be at least 3 months for it. So that's what I did then when I wasn't working as a sub. I was in a bowling league. I played bunco. Craig was carpooling to New Orleans. He was exploring for oil now in the Gulf of Mexico. He was also a resource advisor, which meant he was like a coach to the other geoscientists. He would suggest classes they might take or job positions they might go for. Our kids pretty much grew up down here. Craig was a Little League coach, a soccer coach, assistant cub master. I was a den leader. Our youngest son did traveling baseball and soccer teams for a while. When our oldest boy got into high school, he was in wrestling. So there was many weekends where he'd be with the wrestler, I'd be with the soccer player. Our oldest son became an Eagle Scout. He earned his Eagle Scout award down there. And he graduated from high school. And we also had a pool in our backyard, so we had teen parties there, adult parties there. We were the party house. Craig continued to sing in the choir, and we really enjoyed Mardi Gras season. We did the back roads to get from this parade to this parade, and it would be unusual for us to do like 3 parades in a day. And our kids loved it. So that was New Orleans.
Wow, so good times.
There was.
All right, well, next move is back to Texas, but this time it's Houston for 14 years. So Greg, tell us about that.
Well, they say that all geology or all oil and gas roads lead to Houston. So at some point you kind of expect you're going to end up there. This was the one move where we actually had some control on the timing. It was kind of inevitable it was going to happen, and I was able to kind of say, I want to go now. I just had my older son graduate from high school. My younger son had just 1 year of high school under his belt. It was the right time to move, so you didn't get caught in a move like he was a junior or senior. So we did that, and as she mentioned, he was a two-sport guy, two-sport tie, soccer and baseball. And we actually went to Houston and looked at schools first. And we heard from some other people who had made the move, is that it was really hard for an athlete coming from New Orleans or from Louisiana to compete with those in Texas who had kind of come up through the school system there and already kind of locked in their friends and their teams and that kind of thing. And we thought that was really fair, a guy coming in new. So we went to a place where there was a brand new school opening up, a new high school. And we chose the high school, and then we found a house within that reach. Meanwhile, Kyle spent the summer with us for a couple months, and then went off to Ohio University for college. So we were there, and we were living in Katy, Texas. It was one of the fastest growing counties in the country at that point in time. Bev got a job pretty quickly with Perry Homes, which was the builder that we bought our house from. And she spent the next 8 years working in various models as the models would move around, as new sections would open up, working with an agent selling homes. In 2001, Texaco and Chevron merged. And it's a pretty compatible merger in terms of 2 major companies. It didn't work out great for me, however, because some of my colleagues in the Texaco exploration group took retirement. He said, we're going to leave. I decided to stay, and I ended up in an IT job for a while, which wasn't a great place for a geologist to be. There was some practical reason why it made some sense, but it wasn't an organization a great place to be. So I had to kind of soldier through that. And again, you have to reinvent yourself when you stay with the company for as many years as I did. So I was in IT, supporting geology people, but not doing geology work, basically. Both my parents died in 2005, 2006 during that time. And then Todd finished high school, went on to Georgia, and found a Georgia girl. Next thing you know, he graduated and he got married. Just like 2006. So that was kind of cool. And now we got people in Georgia, and next thing you know, there's kids coming. Meanwhile, I got back in exploration after a few years, which was really nice. And at that point in time, I was working international exploration. So projects that could have been anywhere around the world. And it was opened the door for me to do some international travel. And we also started doing some travel with our church, which was kind of cool as well. So our international travel really started in that mid-2005, 2006 period, Europe, and the travel that I did with my company. In 2009, we became grandparents for the first time. So that's very close to us, and that was really our social circle, was our church. It was just up the road. We did a lot of things there. Ben was on church council, call committees. I was in, again, choir, taught Sunday school. I was also a charter board rep for the Boy Scout troop that was sponsored at the church, so we had very much involved Boy Scouts then. And then finally, in 2013, I retired. We'll get into that and talk more about Soleil, but the bottom line was we moved to Georgia a week after I retired. My retirement dinner was in Pekanbaru, Indonesia. And it was an interesting cultural story. In Indonesia, senior employees are very well respected. And they were so honored that in the last month that I was working, I was down there doing a training assignment. And so I remember that last dinner in a restaurant in Pekanbaru on the island of Sumatra.
Wow. Well, I know you both had a long time focus on travel. So, Greg, would you explain your philosophy of how you travel and use it in selecting on your trips?
Well, a lot of us here in Soleil travel a lot, so I'm not here to say that our travel is any more spectacular than anybody else's. When I reflect on it, though, I think that we approach travel with what I would call an exploratory spirit. It kind of links back to the exploration mindset that I think I utilized successfully in my career. So exploratory means we want to go to new places. We're not interested in going back to the same place over and over again. And that's true whether it's U.S. or whether it's abroad. And it also means that we like to look for interesting places along the way. You're going from point A to point B. What's interesting in between that might be worth your time?
Yes. So give us some examples that illustrate.
So a couple of examples of that, and we've got some books in the back of the room that might kind of help illustrate that later on. We've done a lot of Western U.S. states and national parks and so forth. A couple examples that come to mind. One time we were in Essever National Park and Durango, and the Durango Silverton Railroad, which we've probably done in southwestern Colorado. And we were going to the Great Sand Dunes in eastern Colorado. So about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive. It took us 2 days to do that because we stopped at Chimney Rock, a historic archaeological site that's now a national monument. We went to a waterfall national forest, have visited several breweries. Well, as some of my friends know, we've been to over 700 breweries. But you don't get there, you don't stop along the way, you know? National wildlife refuges, hot springs, those are all things you can find that are interesting between one national park and commons and another one. Another example was when we were out in Utah supporting our son, who was an ultra runner around Salt Lake City. We wanted to go up to Glacier National Park. Along the way, we went to, a ghost town, an elk museum, a couple breweries, a wildlife refuge, and a historic, church and monastery, all to get to Glacier National Park.
Right.
So that's the mindset that we have.
Well, Bev, I know you have already explored 49 of the 50 states, and you've been to 45 of the national parks and many foreign countries. So you both seem to like exploring nature and the culture. Can you explain that?
Well, in moving around from Midland to Denver to New Orleans and back to Houston, we saw many different cultures. In West Texas, you have the rodeos. And that was my first experience with the Hispanic culture. I was a New York girl, remember? So, going out there was a culture shock for me. New Orleans, you have Mardi Gras, you have the Cajuns, party all the time. So, it is very different. So there's plenty of culture right here in the United States. We have an interest in history, geography, and after 45 years, I learned to appreciate geology. Our first trip was before we had kids, and he alluded to that earlier. We went down to Hopper Canyon in Mexico, which is Mexico's Grand Canyon. It was spectacular. But we stayed in this little village called Sarakawa, and there was no electricity in the rooms. And we were told that before we got there. They had sent the cook to American cooking school, and she said, they don't want American food, they want Mexican Indian food, which is what she cooked for us that night. When we went to bed that night, we had to light the stove in our room so we would have heat. And then our wake-up call was a serenade in the courtyard the next morning. So, there's culture and differences out there all over the place.
True, true. Well, Greg, tell us about some of the unusual places that your job has taken you.
So, traveling for geological purposes is a function of going to places where there's either geology to see in the field, or where there's other offices, other geologists to coordinate with, either your own company or perhaps other companies. In the later years, I went to places like West Africa, I've been with Nigeria and Angola, working with geologists from Chevron that were based in those places. Went to the Middle East, twice to Kuwait, went to Australia, Western Australia. And that was a trip where I spent 3 weeks there working, and then she flew over, we spent another 10 days on vacation in Western Australia. And then probably the most unique place, unique even within my company, I was probably one of 2 or 3 geologists that spent time in Greenland. And that was a work trip. We were on a field trip looking at rocks in the outcrop, traveling by boat around the peninsula on the western side of Greenland. I've got the photo book in the back of it almost to see pictures of Greenland. The challenge there was my luggage didn't make it. So I had to kind of work with whatever I packed in my carry-on bag and what few things I could find in a little store in Ilulissat, Greenland. But it still was a spectacular trip, and those are the kind of experiences sometimes are unique that only your work can bring you.
Ben, would you describe a favorite trip that you have taken and why was it so?
Well, I'm thinking, we just came back from a really great trip, but I think my favorite trip is still Croatia. We did a trip called Country Roads in Croatia. And I'd seen photos of the Dalmatian coast and thought, gee, that looks beautiful. I'd really love to see it sometime. And so for our 40th wedding anniversary, we did a trip to Croatia. And it was a land coach trip. But it took us out onto the islands off the Dalmatian coast where we could stay for a couple of nights there. We got down to Montenegro. We got up to Slovenia at one point. There's a lot of history there, which, again, we both like. A lot of beauty, natural beauty. We went to Clifford Lakes National Park, and there was probably hundreds and hundreds of waterfalls. You just walk along the pathways.
Stunning place.
All these waterfalls. So, yeah, I gotta say it was probably a bucket list trip for me.
Yeah,
If you haven't been, you might want to look at it.
yeah, that book's in the back too.
One of the
One
two.
photo books in the back.
Well, Greg, I know that this summer you and Ben just got back from Ireland and then Iceland. So what's on your future plans?
Well, in about 10 days, I'll be leaving with my 2 sons to go on a rafting trip down the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
So 8 days. Don't try to email me or text me, I'll have no service.
I'm available for parties.
And again, it's a kind of bucket list place for geologists to go, much like Iceland is. And I had made the comment, I guess I'm on my way, but I thought that ship had sailed for me and my older son took that on as a challenge, and I worked that out. So this trip in a couple weeks here. Beyond that, we've made arrangements to go down to catch the rest of Australia that we didn't see the first time, and New Zealand in the wintertime. We'll be their summer, our winter, so that'll come up early next year.
Wow. We're lucky to have them home occasionally. Well, we're going to move now to Soleil for 9 years so far. So, Craig, what motivated you and Beth to move here from Texas?
Well, we had our first 2 grandchildren born here in Athens, where our son was living with his wife Casey, and it's about a 15-hour drive, or it's a plane ride to come from Houston up to Georgia. So, being a long-distance grandparent didn't really appeal to us longer term. Our other son was living in Birmingham. After Ohio, he went to live in Wisconsin for a short period of time, but most of his time was living professionally in Birmingham. He's not married, so and he's a living target. Nevertheless, he does live there. So we started looking at North Georgia as a place to retire, and Ben did most of the research on this, just internet research primarily. And one of our Christmas trips up here, we said, let's go check this place out. And we did that. And we looked at the models, and we found a model we kind of liked. And a year later, we came back again at Christmas time and said, let's see what's going on over here. And we decided it was time to commit to a lot. There weren't many lots that fit the model that we were interested in. We were still working with 11 models then. The new model home park actually opened during the time that we were committed to a lot but hadn't started building yet. So, Soleil, for many of us, it stands out. It's a special place. And we saw that early on, and it gave us a chance to be close to our families, but not too close.
Well, Bev, I know that you and Craig are very involved in things here. So could you tell us, what do you enjoy doing? What's your passion?
Well, I'm primarily a bridge player these days. Picked that up again after 30 years. But I try not to play any more than 3 days a week. I'm involved with the photography club some. I have been known to sing at karaoke. Usually it's a duet. I helped out with holiday decorations last year. I helped out at Amazing Race. Help, taking pictures and videos. I've always enjoyed cooking. And the first meal I made for Craig was called chicken yalla. That became a family favorite throughout the years. When our youngest son went to Georgia, you submitted your recipes, favorite home recipes, and they made them in the dining halls before the freshmen took their first exams. They chose that recipe. So there's a plate in the back there that I received from the University of Georgia for that. From that, evidently, I think there was a write-up in USA Today about that competition, and my name might have been mentioned in there, I'm not quite sure. But I eventually had Southern Living get in touch with me. There was a lady out of Dallas who worked. Anyway, I ended up in Southern Living, and they had to change the name, so it's in Southern Living as Baked Curry Glazed Chicken. When I came here to Soleil, of course, a cooking club was a natural fit. So I joined Winers and Diners, and the first time I hosted a meal with them, it was my chicken recipe, which we said, well, we can't call it baked curry glaze because curry will turn too many people off. So we made it Bev's Honey Chicken. And that, in the last Soleil cookbook, that's what it is, Bev's Honey Chicken.
Good.
And I have done that for Winers and Diners. I've also done it for 4 seasons as a guest chef. And I have another guest chef appearance coming up in this next spring. So you can Google my name and the recipe will come up.
Good stuff.
Well, we're moving right along because our time is short.
Yes.
So, Craig, you're also very involved, and I know you head up the photography club.
never would have guessed. They would have thought I'd be president of the photography club, but I was invited by a neighbor, and then after some health issues, those who started the club kind of needed some help, and here I am 6 years later, president of the photography club. But I've got a great, community group of photographers here, new folks all the time that are contributing. It's a place where we learn from one another, and we also serve our community. So I'm involved with that. I'm also involved in the communications committee and the Celebrity magazine, which all kind of ties into the photography part of it. So I've been known as a photographer. Some folks know me as a singer. Wasn't long after I came here that I was invited to join the Slave Singers by Helen Ford. And after a couple of years of that, I got involved with a men's a cappella group called the Men of Soul. And that led to an invitation to join the Silver Sounds. So Men of Soul doesn't exist right now, but I've been singing choral music, for most of the 9 years I've been here, I guess now. Just karaoke stuff, just mixed with SRT, and we do a musical production there. So yeah, I like to sing. As I mentioned, I've been involved with SRT. I've acted in 4 of the SRT productions over the course of the years. One of them with you. We did World Worlds.
Right.
And I'm also have helped out a lot of the graphic support for other groups as well that do SRT things. So SRT is a wonderful place to get involved in a lot of different kind of ways. And I've dabbled in some of those. I'm involved with the Men's Christian Fellowship, of course sponsors the Easter service and the Thanksgiving service and teach Bible study. I'll be leading Acts 4 lesson tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the poker room. Got more to do on that tonight yet. So yeah, and of course I play bridge and the cooking club, so yeah, my life is pretty full here. It's much for retirement.
And I'm the house manager too, because he's never home. Somebody has to be there, pay the bills, and cook and clean.
I can run a vacuum.
But what is your saying about that?
Behind every man, there's a stronger woman. Yeah.
Well,
It's not easy.
finally. Bev, I know that you have lived in a lot of places, a lot of different cultures, but please describe the special community spirit that you have found here at Select.
Well, we're all going through the same life stuff. If we're not going through it now, we might be going through it later. We used to get our friendships and our support through our church relationships. And even though we belong to a church, it's down in Woodstock now. So it's not very close. So now we get that here in Select, our friendships and our support. It's, who to call at 3 a.m. in the morning. And you need to think about that. Who are you going to call at 3 a.m. in the morning? It's probably going to be one of your neighbors. So we find Soleil is a very caring community.
I think that's fabulous. We now have a last opportunity to pronounce correctly Bev's Craig's last name. Together, let's say it. Stichtenoth.
So Bev, was it hard?
No, not at all.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yes, yes. It was, Helen was very easy to work with. I suggest other people do
Now, this guy that you said, you know this guy here? Yeah, because here's an Appalachian Trail guy. He knows exactly what rock you're talking about.